Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Thursday, July 28th. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Matt Hoffman in for Maya Trabulsi. $68 million. San Diego is reaping the rewards from a hefty state budget surplus. And today, local health officials are taking the opportunity to show off where all that money is going. Here's KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen.
Mayor Todd Gloria gathered with state and local leaders at the Oak Park Library. The city got $20 million from the state to design and construct a new library here, long on the community's wish list. Gloria says the city can't fund all its infrastructure needs alone.
There are so many competing needs in our community, too many for local governments and our strapped budgets. And that's why it's so critical that we have effective representation in the state capitol to help us get these projects done for the people and for our communities.
The state budget surplus this year reached a record $97 billion. State Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins says that shows California's system of progressive taxation is working.
The wealthy pay their share, making record amounts of funding available. The state's fiscal health made it possible for us to provide transformational investments in critical programs across the state.
The state budget also allocates more than $29 million to parks and recreation projects in San Diego, including $8 million to expand Ward Canyon Park in Normal Heights. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Newly released data is fueling recession fears as many families are already dealing with higher prices. On the flip side, jobs are being created and filled, leading some experts to believe a recession is not imminent. Reporter Isabel Rosales looks at the balancing act underway to keep our economy rolling.
Make sure the butter doesn't melt.
Dawn McKelvey can't imagine things getting worse under a recession. The unemployed mom of four already relies on her local South Los Angeles food bank to feed her kids.
You really don't know what you would do, what anybody's going to do, because I'm not the only one that would be suffering. Everybody else is suffering too.
But some economists say we could already be in a recession, pointing to bleak economic data released this week.
One of the most critical 48 hours for the U.S. economy in recent memory.
On Thursday, the latest gross domestic product data showed the U.S. economy shrunk for a second quarter in a row. Economist Joe Brusuelas says that meets a historic definition of a recession. But the group of economists who can formally declare it and look at multiple factors could take months to act.
Recessions are never good, and there's going to be some pain involved, meaning higher unemployment, loss of income, and some dislocation across the economy.
It comes one day after the Fed raised interest rates again, aimed at fighting off white-hot inflation and those skyrocketing prices.
These are the blueberries that we get from there.
But for McKelvey, higher costs at the grocery store are already eating up too much of her budget.
I spent close to $400, and it wasn't even hardly on much meat because meat is so high. It was just like bread, juice, and stuff for my kids' snacks. It was ridiculous.
If there's a downturn, Reverend Norman Johnson from First Christian Fellowship Baptist Church says the already struggling LA community he serves will be hit hard.
The issue is inflation. It's not so much the shortage of food. It's the fact that people can't afford it.
Reverend Johnson says he's seeing an uptick in the number of families showing up to the weekly food bank and anticipates a bigger influx if a recession is bad enough where people start losing jobs.
We really saw it in the pandemic, and the ethnic variety changed. It wasn't just black and brown. We had Asian, Anglo, and so forth finding their way down to South LA to get food.
Meanwhile, the Fed has hinted more interest rates are coming, and that means soaring borrowing costs for first-time home buyers like Jose Cañas.
It is a little scary, obviously, because we're going to be paying a little bit more in interest.
Cañas was approved for a loan in April with a 4.75% interest rate, but is now choosing to wait until his girlfriend finishes nursing school to reapply jointly.
Now we're seeing interest rates as high as 6%.
The fear and hesitation is real among home loan applicants.
So what do you think about those pre-approvals?
New American Funding reports mortgage applications are down significantly in July compared to the beginning of the year.
About 30% drop in applications on regards to purchases.
The R word out there is creating this sense of fear in a lot of consumers.
Isabel Rosales, KPBS News.
The White House disagrees that we're in a recession. They point to a strong labor market not reflected in that negative GDP number. Unemployment numbers are already low at 3.6%, and companies are still hiring. Higher interest rates are no doubt playing a factor in home sales, but what about cars? Coming up, we speak with local dealerships about sales and the impact it has on all of us. The Biden administration could soon declare the spread of monkeypox a health emergency. It could help bring more vaccines to San Diego. There's a national shortage as cases continue to rise in the U.S. Latest numbers are showing 4,600 infections, about 800 of which are in California. 20 cases have been found in San Diego, and health officials attribute them all to travel. Anyone can contract monkeypox, but those most at risk right now include gay or bisexual men, and that's where vaccines are being targeted locally. 2,200 doses have been secured so far.
Now, no arguments that the amount of vaccine available is not enough. That said, I also want to point out that the supply crunch with the vaccine is not primarily the state's fault. There is a national supply shortage just generally, and unfortunately, it's going to be a while before that changes. But I can say to the community unequivocally that all the doses that we get, you're going to get, and that's a promise.
Targeted vaccination events will continue as supply comes in. Monkeypox usually does not send people to the hospital. It can cause flu-like symptoms or rashes, and it's spread through close contact. Los Angeles County will not bring back an indoor mask mandate after all. The county announced 2 weeks ago that LA could again require face coverings if trends in hospital admissions continued. But today, health officials said hospitalizations have actually stabilized, while COVID-19 infections have steadily declined. It potentially signals the beginning of a downward trend. The Border Patrol is moving forward with plans to build huge walls in Friendship Park. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne says supporters of the park are hoping that they can at least slow the project down.
The 30-foot tall walls along the U.S. and Mexico border are nothing new, and those 30-foot walls are now expected to expand to Friendship Park. Advocates for the park met with the Border Patrol late Wednesday.
Border Patrol officials began the meeting by confirming their plans to build two 30-foot walls across the face of Friendship Park.
John Fanisil with Friends of Friendship Park says the 30-foot bollard-style walls adds to the desecration of this unique location.
Friendship Park is not just any other location on the border. It is a site of unique historic, cultural, environmental, and social significance. And it is a symbol of the truth that the peoples of the United States and Mexico are friends, not enemies.
While Border Patrol confirmed the new plans do include public access, Fana still thinks local stakeholders should have been included in the conversations about changes.
They did not specify anything else about the design of gates or accessibility. It was a very general presentation without the schematics that we had been promised previously.
Fana still fears that making Friendship Park look like the rest of the border walls will discourage its use. In a letter, Friends of Friendship Park requested a 120-day pause on construction,
so that a meaningful process of consultation with stakeholders could be undertaken. Such consultation has not taken place.
The coalition will hold a stakeholder summit at the end of the month and hopes Border Patrol officials will pause construction by that time. In a previous statement, CBP said construction was expected to start in September. Friends of Friendship Park say they expect a response from CBP about the request to pause construction by next week. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Tonight, all evacuation warnings in the Casner fire near Ramona have been lifted. The fire burned 180 acres along State Route 78. It was in the footprint of the Witch Creek fire back in 2007. At last checked, it was 35% contained, and firefighters are still working there to prevent any flare-ups. CAL FIRE says they've been at peak staffing since June and were able to quickly deploy dozens of crews. They also called in extra aircraft from Riverside County. Investigators determined the cause of the fire was sparked by equipment.
This was somebody who was trying to clear their property. They were trying to do the right thing. And unfortunately, it was warm yesterday, and it was enough to really take off on them and reach a point where they weren't able to stop it themselves.
It's recommended that homeowners clear brush before 10 a.m. Don't do it on hot or dry or even windy days, and be extra cautious. CAL FIRE says from now through December, it's peak fire season, and the conditions will only get worse until we get some significant rainfall.
Here's a look at our weather headlines, and really no big changes going on right now, but over the weekend, we do think there will be some significant change to talk about. For now, we're still dealing with the morning clouds, giving way to some afternoon sun. We will start to see some thunderstorms erupting in the mountains and into the inland areas by the weekend. Maybe a few could trickle towards the coast. Can't rule it out entirely. And the temperatures, they'll remain nearly steady. Don't see any big changes temperature-wise, but we do see this monsoonal moisture. It's been just sitting off to our east, and right through the end of the week, a significant supply of moisture coming up through Arizona. Some of that has been sneaking off to the west, and we've seen some more clouds moving into our area. Flow over the weekend will turn more southeasterly, so that will allow a couple of these thunderstorms to head their way and develop farther towards the west. Overnight tonight, no big change, becoming cloudy, the low 67. Looking around the area, it'll be dry. Borrego Springs, a warm night at 80. Mount Laguna, 65. El Cajon at 70. And Oceanside at 66. For Friday, that deep monsoonal moisture is still off to our east. We'll keep it dry here. Really no big changes. We'll start off with the morning clouds giving way to sunshine. Temperatures hovering in the mid-70s near the coast. We'll warm it up to mid-80s, lower 90s inland. And here you can see Borrego Springs will be up in the triple digits. As we take you into Saturday, spotty afternoon storms, they'll start to develop into the mountains and the deserts. So we'll see increased cloud cover too. And as I said earlier, there could be a stray shower storm sneaking towards the coast at about any time of the day over the weekend, but we're not expecting much. A little bit more significant in the inland areas, saying partly sunny, but there could be a storm or two on the prow. A little better chance in the mountain regions. You can see a few thunder showers, mid-70s, and even the deserts can't rule out a stray storm, with temperatures staying below average. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
The Marines are looking at why Waves capsized its latest version of its seaborne troop transport. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh explains.
A video posted by the independent nonprofit Naval Institute shows several Marines jumping out of one of the new amphibious combat vehicles as the vehicle was tossed by high waves near the shore at Camp Pendleton. A vehicle eventually tipped on its side and became disabled. The Marines paused all waterborne exercises for the ACV when the accident happened last week. No one was injured. Though the vehicles aren't allowed in the open ocean, training has since been allowed to continue in the boat basin at Del Mar. The Marines are just rolling out the new ACV, which looks like a floating tank and carries Marines from ship to shore. Last year, the Marines suspended waterborne operations for the new ACV when problems with the tow ropes caused another vehicle to overturn in the surf. The ACV is the long-awaited replacement for the aging amphibious assault vehicle. In 2020, 8 Marines and a sailor drowned when one of those vehicles sank in the waters off San Clemente Island. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
The car industry has been going through some dramatic changes since the pandemic hit, from supply chain issues to chip shortages and low inventory. So what's happening now, and how is that affecting a city that relies on tax revenue from those sales? Here's KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado to break it all down.
Todd Southervong is hauling a full load of cars out of the Marine Terminal lot in National City. He's been a car hauler since 2007.
It was tough, yes.
Up until recently, regular trips and a full load have been a rarity because of pandemic supply chain issues and a chip shortage.
Well, we barely have work. We've been driving about 1-2 cars here. To make it full load, we got to go about 5 drops. Yeah.
And how has it been lately?
It has been all right for the last 2 months. It's been picking up for the last 2 months. And from now, I don't know, but For the last 2 months, it's been picking up.
He now does an average of 2 full loads a day. This one is headed for Santa Ana. Just a few miles away is the Mile of Cars, one of the oldest car associations in the country. It was started in the 1900s.
It's clearly an institution in the city.
National City's city manager Brad Ralston says it's not only an institution in a city, it and other car dealerships also help bring in about $10 million a year, a big part of the city's revenue that provides services like public safety.
From a quarter to a third of our sales tax revenue that we depend on to provide core services. When COVID, actually hit, there was a significant, decrease, of course. And when I say significant, I would say, 40 to 50% of a decrease.
He says, fortunately, the dealership supplemented with used car sales, and that decrease only lasted about a quarter. Now they're seeing a steady 3 to 5% increase in that revenue.
So when we look at the data, it's impossible to segregate new cars versus used cars.
You thought 2008, 2009 was crazy when GM and Chrysler filed for bankruptcy and sales dropped 50% and said, nothing like that craziness could ever happen in my career again. And
Brian Moss, the president of the California New Car Dealers Association, has seen a lot in the more than 2 decades he's worked in the auto industry. But then, he says, COVID broke everything.
There's not enough inventory to go around. You're waiting days or weeks or months for particular vehicles. Prices are going crazy, both in used cars and new cars. It's really unprecedented.
He says the overall picture with new car sales has stabilized somewhat despite the initial drop, but now they're about 10 to 15% below pre-pandemic levels.
That's not because there isn't demand. There's significant demand for vehicles, which is why you've seen the price of new cars go up considerably over the last several months or a year and a half. But it's really a question of not having the supply of cars to fulfill the needs of consumers.
Moss says while we may have seen rows and rows of new trucks at the port in National City, not all makes and models are having the same luck when it comes to supplies, and that may continue to be an issue through 2023. But he's optimistic, especially when it comes to prices.
Hopefully we can get through it and get to a little bit more normalcy in the coming months.
And that will be a good thing, not just for customers, but for car haulers like Todd and cities like National City, relying on this industry. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Today, San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria announced his selection for the city's new chief operating officer. Eric Dargan was chosen through a national search that fielded nearly 200 candidates. He currently serves as the chief operating officer of the Houston Public Works Department. He's worked in the city of Houston, the 4th largest city in the country, for more than 20 years. Dargan will be tasked to carry out the mayor's plans to invest in infrastructure, increase housing, and improve services.
Working with the mayor, I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to look at new ideals, new processes, new procedures, innovative actions that can really bring a new flavor to the city of San Diego.
Eric? The confirmation hearing for Dargan's appointment as COO is scheduled for the City Council meeting on September 12th. If confirmed, he will take over on November 1st. UC San Diego students have a lot at stake in the housing crisis, with a shortage of homes both on and off campus. But some see an opportunity in University City, just east of UCSD. The city's planning department is preparing to update that neighborhood zoning to allow for more density. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says many students are frustrated with a system that seems designed to exclude them.
Yeah, the ease of access is really good.
Andrew Parlier shows me around UCSD's newest housing development for grad students, just across the I-5 freeway from the main campus. The PhD candidate in applied ocean science has lived here since 2019.
It's really easy to get to campus and to get to food and things like that as well. And with the new trolley line opening, which has been wonderful, the blue line's been amazing to be able to get downtown.
Student housing is in high demand, and the wait list keeps getting longer. And off-campus housing isn't any easier. Parlier says more students are being forced into longer and longer commutes to find housing they can afford. That's why he wants the city planning department to zone for as much high-density housing in University City as possible.
We need to find ways to be friendly with the climate and to reduce our emissions at the same time. High-density housing, public transit, alternative transit modes achieve that.
Parlier is the lone student representative on the University Community Planning Group, a volunteer body where the planning department does most of its outreach. He says the group and attendance at its meetings is dominated by homeowners, like Linda Beresford, who had this to say at a meeting in March.
Allowing transient UCSD students to have as much say as people who have invested here is not a true representation of resident desires.
I think it's important for students to be able to have a say in it. We're not transient.
Leanna Cortez is a junior at UCSD who's been organizing her classmates to get more engaged in the zoning debate. She says the stakes for students dealing with the housing shortage are high. A national survey recently found 17% of college students have been homeless in the past year, and almost half of them face housing insecurity.
We're talking about people surfing people's couches. They might secure housing for 3 months, but where are they going to go after that? These are problems that students have to face while, having all their studies and all their extracurriculars, and they shouldn't have to do that.
Cortez says it's hard work trying to get students more involved in the planning process, and there are structural barriers to participation. Students who live on campus aren't allowed to vote in planning group elections, and she says she's never seen the planning group do anything on campus.
There's just not enough outreach to begin with for people to even know that they can get engaged, and when people are interested and they want to join these spaces, they're faced with that negativity.
Students have a critical viewpoint and a role to play in the process.
Andy Weiss sits on the University Community Planning Group and runs the meetings focused on how much new housing should be allowed. He says he does his best to promote civility and active listening in meetings, and he says the folks who don't want students around will have to get used to them. Many students stick around after graduation, and even when they don't,
people like them will be here. We know that, and more of them will be here, and their views represent, what we can imagine to be the concerns of their peers to come.
Still, Weiss doesn't always agree with students. For example, he opposed a proposal to allow medium-density townhomes in parts of South University City, where the current zoning allows only low-density detached homes. He fears that will displace existing residents.
To the extent that proposal looked like a displacement proposal, I think it was ill-considered.
Cortez says South University City is a wealthy area, and homeowners there are not at risk of displacement.
It's not like we're tearing people's houses down, right? We're just trying to make sure that there's enough space for everyone to live here.
The city expects to have a draft of the new University City Community Plan sometime next year. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
College students who grew up in foster care in San Diego County will benefit this school year from millions of dollars in new state funding. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has their story.
This is a good area to hang out, especially if we have company or guests.
Roberto Lopez is happy to show off where he lives. He rents one of the apartments here at Wesley House on the campus of San Diego State University. It's an affordable housing complex that makes room for students who have a low income and often grew up in foster care.
That came from a place where we didn't really have role models or anyone to look up to, so life was just really understanding it on your own. So I made a lot of mistakes throughout my time.
Late last month, Governor Newsom signed the newest California budget with the support of the state legislature that includes an additional $48 million in the next year to support foster youth in college, starting with the need for housing.
This is the open pantry that we have.
At Wesley House, there is free food offered to residents and a couple of hundred other SDSU students who need it every month. The social and emotional security offered here feeds the spirit of young people who never had the support of a family. The program's executive director shared the reality of one of her recent residents.
They really never thought a college education was for them. They thought only wealthy people were able
to attend college. And this person will be graduating this fall.
If it really does take a village to raise a child, foster youth need even more support. According to the statistics, of the foster kids who get into a university like San Diego State, only 8% will graduate. San Diego's Promises to Kids is the only foster care organization in the U.S. that supports those children in need from birth through adulthood. They never age out of the Promises programs and the lifetime mentorship they need.
What type of counselor do they have that's advising them? Who are the people in their lives to make sure they go to school, do their homework? All the things that are required to stay on top of your academics and build it into what you see yourself doing in the future.
Ikemba Dyke came to the U.S. from Jamaica alone when he was 16 after being abandoned by his father and abused by his mentally ill mother. More state funding means he will be able to keep his apartment and graduate from SDSU next spring with a double major in criminal justice and public administration.
There's people out there that want to hear you. There's people out there that, respect your story and that will love to be a part of your life and your journey.
A journey for students like these that the state of California just made a little bit easier. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Here's a look at what we're working on tomorrow inside of the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, keeping food scraps out of landfills, how San Diego is working to comply with California state laws to recycle organic waste, and what's standing in their way. San Diego Pride and Comic-Con have come and gone, but there's still plenty to do this weekend. On Midday Edition, our picks for the best in arts and entertainment. You can find tonight's story on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.